News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media. A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Granosky. So glad to be with you again across FM and AM podcast and video stream for another news and analysis time where we're going to look at the news like nobody else does. That's what you've come to expect. We're going to challenge the toxic groupthink as best as we can because we need to empower the human person with hope and dignity. I'm tired of these blame games, aren't you? I'm tired of turning on the television and being told, okay, pick a blame game team and just go to town blaming everybody else for your problems. That doesn't solve anybody's problems. That doesn't help anybody as we struggle to try to make sense of this crazy world we live in. Doesn't help us to just turn to blaming and all that stuff. That stuff is a waste of time, but that's what politics is all about. It's all about picking a team and telling everybody else that the other team is the villains. That's just boring. It doesn't solve anybody's issues. It doesn't help them get clean air. Doesn't help them get sunshine. Doesn't help them get strong immune system. Doesn't help them get rid of diseases. Doesn't help anybody. Doesn't help you pay your bills. Doesn't help educate your kids. Blaming people for problems doesn't solve anything. And yet that's all we get on tap from DC and the political-oriented programs around this country, on both sides of the aisle and every side in between. Blame, blame, blame. That's all we ever hear. But we don't have time for that, do we? We have to move beyond that. We have to move towards justice, towards true reconciliation, towards repentance. You don't like that word. People don't like that word, but that's a good, healthy word. We need that because it's right to move away from bad stuff. It's right to move away from failing ideas. And that's what repentance is about. It's about transforming and renewing your mind. It doesn't have to be some kind of out of touch, austere concept. It's a joyful thing. It's about moving away from bad ideas and reclaiming your human birthright of freedom. Freedom not just from external tyranny, but freedom first from internal tyranny, from the tyranny of the mind that keeps us stuck in self-hatred, doubt, fear. Fear robs us of our dignity. Fear robs us of our ability to see the beauty and the good all around us. It gets us stuck on, the same old frequency that we always seem to be finding ourselves in when we look towards economic issues or so forth in a political frame. We don't want to have fear. Fear is healthy. It's okay to have it, but we don't want to stay in fear. We don't want to stay in that low resolution approach to life. Staying in fear robs us of our joy. It robs us of our dignity. It robs us of our creativity. It's hard to improve your quality of skills when you're just owned by fear. It's harder to do a better job at your workplace when you're owned by fear. It's harder to take care of your health when you're owned by fear. So we have to let go of it. We can't let that kind of thing just percolate and saturate our state of being. We have to move beyond that kind of feeling. And people don't like to talk about feelings, especially, you talk to folks in the, conservative political media. No one wants to talk about feelings. Oh, that's liberal. No, it's not liberal. It's called human. It's what we are made of. Emotions can be deceptive, but there's nothing wrong with recognizing how we feel. That's not weak. That's called humanity. Wars get started because people don't know how to control their emotions, right? So let's talk about how we feel. Bad things happen because they don't know how to control their emotions, and just saying, oh, no, I'm only going to deal with facts is going to miss out on how to manage the way we feel about certain things, because you can internalize a lot of shame and guilt and anger, and it can come out as bad, bad habits in your personal life, bad ways of thinking in your personal life. And that's just not something that we want to allow to go unaddressed. That's not how that we're going to make progress together. We have to make progress by having joy and creativity, liberty. Liberty is something we should cultivate. Not liberty in and of itself. Some people say markets can become a religion. I agree. Markets can become a religion. Deifying, making, transactions is a problem. And it's been said that the conservative movement has had a long love affair with deifying markets. And I could say, yeah, I can see that. I can see that. I've also heard some say that, hey, the problem with conservatism is that, they think that the opposite of government is markets. And I kind of agree with that too, because it's true that there's things outside of markets that are not government, right? Things like nonprofits, things like social, cultural things, cultural institutions, church, rituals that we do, all these different things, they are outside of government. They can be. And so you can't just make everything a binary thing of it's either government's got to do it or it's got to be a market thing where you have to, make a product and sell it or service, right? That's a false way to look at it. But it also depends, of course, on what you mean by market. Because if you mean market as a shorthand for just nonviolent interactions where there's no coercion, then on that technical definition of market, yeah, I guess you could even fit churches into that. But I don't think that's an accurate use of the term probably for most people, to try to make clear statements from, right? A church really shouldn't be considered in the domain of a market. Although if you look around, a lot of churches do like to take their cues from marketing. And if you look around, there is a kind of supply and demand that churches engage in, right? What do they supply? They supply a place of belonging. They supply a place of transcendence. They supply a place of community, of accountability, of teaching and learning, of solidarity, of a place for counseling, a place for marriage, a place for burial, a place for all these different things. So there are services that happen in a church, right? There are goods. Goods is something that's good, right? You value something, that's a good. If you don't value it, that's a bad. And so, of course, if you look at it one way, you could say that churches have to deal with market forces. But I guess for the broader public, it's probably better that we just say that church is an example of an institution outside of both the state and market. And it's just one thing of many. And so we don't want to be like conservatives that say everything's binary and just, hey, it's all about, you're either government's going to do it or it's going to be a product that we sell for a profit. That's not how it has to be. But we do need a word, and I don't know what the word is, for talking about how to handle problems together without employing the use of preemptive coercion, which is where the state comes into the midst of things. Because the state, unless it's dealing with violent acts, which it does, but outside of that area, most of what the state offers as a solution for everything is always predicated on the assumption that it's okay to preemptively use coercion to solve problems. And that's the problem I have. And you can call that, people can disparage that notion as saying, oh, you're just sounding like a worshiper of markets, but I don't think at all you have to go there, do you? You can criticize markets. You can see that markets are not the solution for every little thing, that there are institutions outside of goods and services that don't have to be primarily concerned with, making a profit. But at the same time, I am concerned, of course, with this knee-jerk running towards preemptive use of coercion. Some folks understand that it's wrong to use preemptive violence when it comes to starting wars. They call that the preemptive war doctrine that George W. Bush popularized and his people, where we can preemptively go to war because you may go to war with us someday down the road. And people understand that today. And increasingly, the conservative movement has recognized, wait a second, we made a big mistake in going along with that kind of doctrine. That's not right. It's not economically wise, and more importantly, it's morally bankrupt to initiate war as a preemptive thing because someone may go to war with you down the road. It doesn't make any sense. The Christian notion of just war is a much more accurate and closer. I'm not saying I agree with everything about it, but that's at least a little bit more time-tested and a little bit more morally grounded, although there could be problems with that. But even with the just war theory, it's the idea that you don't do preemptive violence. It should be in self-defense. And I think that principle of just war should also be applied to the use of the state in our domestic situations. If just war theory says you should not strike at initiation of violence, you should only act in self-defense, then that's the way the sword of the state should be used for our domestic issues. You should not preemptively use the sword of the state to deal with warring against poverty, for example, or warring against illiteracy or something by having monopoly funding for education. All of these things will create bad outcomes. Because to me, it's very simple. Is this world created with intelligence behind it? Is this world created with a designer? And does that designer have a vision for how we should conduct our lives? And if that's the case, does he make those values that we should hold consistently clear to us? And if that's the case, then where is the exception for us to not apply those moral principles in the way we deal with things? So if it's wrong to do preemptive war overseas, then it should be wrong to do preemptive coercion against your neighbor because they do something with their business that you think isn't very moral. As long as they're not physically assaulting or trying to, or stealing, thieving, or doing fraud, which is a kind of violence in which you trick people out of their resources, which are their property and not yours, then why should we be using the state's sword to go off wielding against every problem that we have? This is a basic principle. Nobody talks about it, and nobody ties it back into, often very few tie it back in, if they do talk about it, into the transcendent, into who we are as a people and where we're going. This is a more important discussion than whether we're deifying the market or not. Because not enough people are actually stepping back and saying, should I treat my neighbor this way? Forget about the question of whether we have rights. That's a question that you can have. But before you even go there, how about what's right and wrong for how you treat your neighbor? And if someone is not paying a wage, they want to do a $15 minimum wage now, right? That's the new thing. And if someone's not paying that $15 minimum wage, then the law says that they can eventually put that person in a cage. For what? A wage that wasn't, that's been decreed by the crowd? Soren Kierkegaard said the crowd is a lie. Why are we going to listen to the crowd for our truth? But even if $15 is a decent wage, the fact that you have to coercively make someone pay it is going to create resentment, it's going to create unintended consequences, and it's going to create a lot of downstream negative effects. That's the problem when we use violence here and there to do what we want. Let's take a break and return. I'm David Gornosky. You're listening to Odd Neighbor's Choice. Back in just a moment. Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved two people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com. Hello, this is David Gornosky with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code Neighbor, are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
You can't have a fresh outlook on the new year if you're staring through a chipped or cracked windshield. Autoglass America will fix it and give you up to $150 cash back to help pay holiday bills. With qualifying insurance, we'll come to you with mobile service and install a premium quality replacement with a lifetime warranty at no cost to you. Get a great outlook on the new year with a new windshield and New Year's cash from Autoglass America. 813-96-GLASS, 813-96-GLASS.
Hello, David Gronowski here. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice as we continue to look at the news. I saw this meme that I wanted to comment here. It says, CDC says just because you got the vaccine doesn't mean you should go outside or ever experience joy again. Now, that's obviously satire, but it's hard to tell the line between satire and truth these days, so I wouldn't be surprised if you took it literal, but, again, I'm just looking at a meme, so maybe they did say that, but I do think that's satire. But just because you got the vaccine doesn't mean you should go outside or ever experience joy again. I think that's from Babylon B, I believe, but I'm not sure. And then here's another story that says, not yet, : Dr. Fauci says Americans vaccinated twice should still avoid restaurants, movie theaters. I think that's from Hannity's group. So that's the kind of stuff. And it ties back into what I'm talking about, that no one's allowed to have joy. You're allowed to have happiness, which is the superficial version of joy, which is all about, consuming in the moment, distractions, amusements. What does the word amusement mean? Muse, right? That's where we get thinking, inspiration. That's the without, right? Like atheist, no God, right? Theist, God, atheist, no God. So amusement is without thinking, without inspiration. And you're allowed to have plenty of amusement in this Build Back Better world that they want to build and that they try to build for decades and decades. Corporatist managed economy world. You can have all the amusement you want, but you're not allowed to have joy. Joy is dangerous. Because if you have joy, joy is connected to gratitude, being thankful, being content. And how can politics even sustain itself if you have a culture of grateful, content, joyful people? So you have to have people always looking at what they don't have and measuring what they have in relationship to what their neighbor has. And that neighbor could be a real neighbor across the street. It could be someone at the workplace. It could be somebody on social media, Instagram, Facebook photos of what other people have, how big their house is, or how nice their boat is, or whatever they have. And that is a machine that fuels the opposite of contentment of joy, of gratitude. Makes you feel like you lack something, and you end up idolizing your neighbors around you. You end up making them like little gods that just seem to rule over you because you can't quite get what they have. You can't quite get their status, and the closer you get to it, the more it doesn't seem to satisfy you like you thought it would. And the other things that you didn't know about your neighbor from afar, as you become obsessed with keeping up with the Joneses, you start to be more annoyed of the differences in the minute problems that the Joneses have once you get closer and closer into their proximity. That really is the fuel of politics. And because our culture is so idolatrous in its worship of the state, it has become the fuel for everything that we see around us. But we don't have to stay there. I want to make this clear. We don't have to stay there. The human will is a powerful thing. The human will can overcome things if you practice and use it. You don't have to stay, even if the dominant culture is pouring all of this energy towards negativity, ungratefulness, and all this bitterness economy, envy economy, resentment economy, distrustful economy, covetous. You don't have to swim with that current. You can stand like a rock. You can go against the tide and every day choose the best habits that you can instill in your life to cultivate joy. And I know that's hard because everybody and everything around you is telling you to not have joy, to have fear and envy. But that's not how you're going to live. You're not going to live life in those prisons. And you're certainly not going to protect your country from tyranny if you're internally in that prison. You have to move beyond that. You have to cultivate joy, and that means focusing on the things that you have that are amazing. You're alive. You have a mind made in the image of God, and you have the opportunity to become more and more like that God with infinite creativity, infinite imagination available from God, imparted into you as his mirror reflection. And you should use that to look at all the wonderful things you have in your life, the friends, the family, the moments, the opportunities, to be joyful for the things that you have and the blessings that we have. And don't let that fear bother you. Don't let the contagion of ignorance and fear get you down. Keep your eyes on the prize. Know that these little tyrants, they come and go, but these eternal truths will never end. Joy unspeakable. That's what we want. That's what we'll push for. Take a quick break and return in just a moment.
Politics these days are just that, politics. Pathetic discussions about things that don't matter, while the pandemic, crime, and economic disparity march on. That's why you need a balanced approach to news, business, and entertainment in the state of Florida. That publication is newstalkflorida.com. Whether it's the White House, the courthouse, or your neighbor's house, News Talk Florida has the sources, articles, video, and audio that will be a must daily check-in from your laptop or mobile device. Take a look at newstalkflorida.com. Today's news and entertainment with a Florida
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo facing a federal investigation into his handling of and possibly hiding nursing home death figures in the pandemic. ABC's Aaron Katersky tells us Cuomo maintains he did not lie.
His aide recently conceded that the governor and his aides kind of stonewalled and didn't quite come clean with the state lawmakers because they feared that the numbers would be used against the administration by former President Trump.
State lawmakers are also considering stripping Cuomo of his emergency powers. Johnson & Johnson making its way through the final review process for its COVID-19 vaccine. That could happen Friday. Nationwide, COVID cases, hospitalizations, and deaths are on the decline. At the same time, health experts say contagious new variants from the UK, South Africa, and Brazil could lead to an uptick, and say Americans need to continue wearing masks and practice social distancing. And an economic bright spot in this pandemic, demand for new homes in the U.S. surging 4.3% in January. Michelle Franzen, ABC News.
So we're soaring high across Florida airwaves and the Sunshine State. With all eyes on Florida, people keep looking at Florida as a bastion of liberty, and the media likes to use Florida as a scapegoat to say, oh, anything you see there, it doesn't work, it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Meanwhile, Florida has, basically similar numbers, I guess proportionally, as states like California and New York, who have used draconian so-called emergency measures that are always extended over and over and over again. More emergency, one more time. I heard, who was it? Is it the gentleman, the woman that was on Tucker Carlson? Was it Naomi Wolf? Was that her name? And she's been around for a while. She worked with the Clinton administration. Yeah, Dr. Naomi Wolf. And she was an advisor for Al Gore and Bill Clinton. And she's considered a leading spokesperson for the third wave of the feminist movement, according to whatever, Daily Clout, whatever that is. But anyways, so Naomi Wolf was on Tucker Carlson, and she talked about how, there's always this history with governments that they always never stop their emergency powers. It's just too intoxicating for people to have such an overreach power and just always make an excuse for having it on the book so they can use it over and 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 over again. And that's a sad reality about how people, human beings, bring out the worst of themselves when they have access to monopoly power that the state gives them. No skin in the game, no personal accountability, no personal liability, but all the opportunity, especially when people are scared, especially when there's a lot of misinformation. In that chaos, bad stuff happens, right? That's the same thing like I tell you all the time about nutrition science. People want single-payer medical care, but how can single-payer health care fix what single-payer nutrition broke, which is our bodies, by getting us to eat toxic amounts of seed oils and carbs and sugar and so forth? And so how can we expect people, given the track record of government failing at everything it tries to touch, especially when it has no checks and balances, which the media should provide, right? The media should provide checks and balances. But you know what the media did? You know what the media monopolists did? When information came out about what Biden's family was doing with a lot of crooked stuff with his family and his sons and stuff and his brother, media buried it. They deleted the New York Post Twitter account. That's the ugly reality of the media today. And that's really kind of in keeping with the historic relationship that the media has had, because it evolves out of a priestly caste. Mediator, that's where you get priests, the mediators. Mediators mediated between, right, what? Those who were allowed to have the sacred power of sacrifice, who will be sacrificed, who will be expelled, who will be caged, who will be killed, so forth, so on, who will be taxed to provide for the others. And who was the one that would explain why they had that power? It was the mediators, the priests, who were in charge of telling the stories and writing down the stories for why those in power could do what those in power do. And so, in some sense, when you see all the media carrying the water for crooked politicians, like those who they tend to be most excited about, like in California and New York and so forth, like deleting real information about the crookedness of the Biden family to help them win the election. You don't have to be worried about like, oh, this is unprecedented. No, this is exactly what media typically does historically. It is the impact of Christianity in our culture which has given us this counter story, this other approach to media that we assume that much of the media should abide by, but they don't, which is a story that is in keeping with what the Gospels themselves are, which are texts, they're stories, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that give an account of a political situation that happens and a persecution that happens, but instead of telling it from the vantage point of the so-called winners of history, the majority of the crowd, no, it tells the story from the person being persecuted. It tells the story from Jesus's perspective as political people come together to expel and punish and humiliate him and accuse him of things and to treat him awful and to isolate him and to kill him. And so that story is a counter story which births what we have taken for granted, the best of journalism, which is the investigative journalist, the one who investigates and reports on the truth against those who are in power. And that can be things like, that movie, I think it's Spotlight, that talks about was it the Boston Herald or something that did the story about the cover up in the Catholic Church with the priest abuse stuff. It can happen in a variety of ways, Daniel Ellsberg coming out with the Pentagon Papers about the Vietnam War. Edward Snowden publishing or having Snowden, Julian Assange publish Edward Snowden's revelations about what he saw from within. Those are examples of a counter current approach to media, which is in the imitation, whether they know it or not, of the way the Gospels function in history, to take the camera from the powerful and shine a light on the victims of the powerful. And that's a powerful thing. That's a huge thing. And we look around and we say, man, why can't the media do that today? Why can't the media do the gospel technology? Why can't they give a voice? Why can't they tell the story of victims and tell it in a way that tells the truth about those who have the power and those who abuse and oppress victims? They never do that. They do a imitation of that. They tell the story of George Floyd. That's a victim of power, right? You can talk, conservatives like to bring up his past, but you shouldn't be, in a situation where he's in because of the issue that he was being dealt with, a $20 bill. There should be a better way to deal with that, right? In a sane and normal society. But the media tells that story, which they imitate a partial form of what I'm calling the gospel technology, which is to give a voice to the victims of the powerful. But they don't do it honestly. They do it in a mutated form. They do it in a dishonest, fraudulent form, because they take that and they take all that emotional energy and currency that's built from people saying this is awful, watching the video and all the things around it. This is horrible. And what do they do with that? They cash it in for what? What do they cash it in for? The election of Joseph R. Biden and Kamala Harris? Are you kidding me? That's what you cash? That is horrible. That is a fraudulent imitation of the gospel technology, because you're using the real emotional pain and solidarity that people feel when they see that video of his death and other people like it. And instead of using that to bring healing to bring restoration, to bring repentance, to bring accountability to out of control, unaccountable monopoly governance. They just use it to divide people about who is the most victim and getting rid of the Jeep Cherokee name. So the Jeep Cherokee name is on fire, but is on the hot seat, but Joseph R. Biden is not after 50 years of bombing people in vulnerable populations all over the world and oppressing people and incarcerating people for victimless choices, using preemptive violence left and right, which fails even the standard of the just war theory. And that's what you get. That's what you stew all that up and then you release it into, here's the solution, Joseph R. Biden's your president now. What? That's it? That's all you have? This is the fraudulent nature of the media. It's imitating the gospel technology, but what is it doing in reality? It's propping up and protecting the powerful. As I've mentioned before, billions were raised off of Eric Garner's death. And they did nothing, those organizations and the media outlets that use that to act like they're morally superior, and they did nothing to abolish the law which gave government officials the opportunity to physically restrain him for selling unlicensed cigarettes. How about abolish the law? Now, I tell that to people who say they're for justice, who say they're for BLM, and a lot of them that I've engaged with, they say, oh, it has nothing to do with the law. What are you talking about? It has nothing to do with the law. They want to always direct it back away from the culprit, the foundation of the mechanisms in our society that oppress us all. Like, why do we have a license deal for cigarettes? And why do we use that license and put a criminal penalty to it that allows people to come into a situation in which violence can occur and potential death can happen? You can talk about the biases that may or may not be there in the moment of them having to arrest this man, but the law should be off the books. It should be nullified so that there is no reason to say, hey, he's selling cigarettes, move along. What can we do? That's not a law because we're not a barbaric culture. We don't cage people and use prison cages to deal with someone selling a cigarette. We are more civilized than that. And we don't send people with the option of using lethal force to deal with that. Cigarettes may be bad, but we're not barbarians, so therefore we don't use preemptive violence. See, this goes back to the just war theory. You don't use preemptive violence. Force is self-defense. Who is being physically harmed by Eric Garner selling cigarettes? And the same thing goes for George Floyd. That's a kind of a violence when someone passes off a $20 bill, allegedly, right? Because that's diluting the purchasing power of those. But that's what the Federal Reserve does every day, creating trillions of dollars out of thin air. Now, does that mean that that's right that George Floyd allegedly did that? No. But you don't use force that's not reciprocal to the issue that's a problem. You shouldn't have to put someone in the back of a prison car, a police car because of a $20 deal. There should be another way to deal with that does not escalate violence, but rather brings about some kind of more peaceful resolution to the situation. I understand it can be hard in the moment. I get it. I understand there's no perfect solutions for some of these things. But that's where the conversation needs to go. To understand the foundations of these mechanisms or laws and the assumptions that we give them, that it's okay to do these horrible things to our neighbors that we would normally never do ourselves. You know? We would never do them individually, but we think somehow if we hire politicians who then hire administrators and agents to do things on our behalf, somehow that magically makes it okay. If a neighbor was selling raw milk from their cows, you wouldn't go into their home and barge down their door and put your knee on their neck if they're moving the wrong way. You wouldn't do that, but somehow you want to hire politicians who then create these laws and so forth that are enforced by agents to go out and do this dirty work for people. I don't think this is a moral way of dealing with things. I don't think that that's an acceptable way of treating our neighbors. You know, you look down you're walking down the door or walking down the sidewalk and you see a neighbor has doing a drug or something in the window. So you think, oh, I can barge into their house, do a no-knock raid or something like that, and tase them or grab them and put a gun in their face and put them in a cage with violent people because they had a drug. That's insane that we would think about doing that ourselves. So why would we scandalize police and blame them and scapegoat them when things go wrong, when they carry out laws that you hired the politician to create or maintain? You see how that's obfuscating your responsibility and our responsibility there? Something goes wrong because you send people with legal immunity, qualified immunity or whatever, and you give them armed with lethal force, and you send them in to chase after vices that never get solved through police action. You use preemptive violence to police people from their own self. And then things go wrong, and what do? They say, now we got to get rid of Jeep Cherokee name, we got to get rid of syrup name, okay, because rather than getting rid of the law and abolishing bad laws that justify and enable bad behavior that we know is wrong if we do it ourselves. That's the way we should talk about politics. Deconstructing the sausage making of the laws themselves and taking the tension away from fighting over identity groups of gender, race, and all this stuff, and uniting as human persons who recognize that we've made mistakes with our institutions and our law, and it's time to do the right thing and to correct those bad choices, bad laws, and to bring skin in the game back into the picture. I'm David Gronowski. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. We'll return after this short break. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER. Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187, Equal Housing Lender.
A lot has happened that has prevented us from feeling like a community. Well, now that things have opened up a bit, let's get back to basics. As a foundation for our neighbors and family, God is a big part of bringing us together. It's time to get back to church. Uplifting, supporting, and loving neighbors that are cherished not only now, but for eternity. Come on, you can use it. The Welcoming Committee is there every Sunday. See you soon.
So we return now on our broadcast. And I want people to remember, if you're on a podcast, you're listening on podcast, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. iTunes, write a review, rate it. That helps grow the audience more and more all over the world. This is a grassroots kind of conversation that we're building together, and it requires your help to make it happen. Not a lot of special interests are interested in liberty and virtue and pro-family and pro-holistic health and the truth about seed oils. They don't want to hear it. There's not a lot of money there yet, because everything is baked on, this whole industry, this whole economy has been built on corporatism, big government, rigging the game for big business, and they protect each other. And it's not serving anybody's interest but the special interests that are in on the game. And that means mostly none of us are included in that. Looking at some of the comments, we are elevating group category status above individual status and assigning guilt and blame to individuals based on group identity. Terrifying. Another, why I am a political atheist. I have no faith in the human governance of this world. Well, that means you don't have any trust in that, which is probably a wise thing to keep. I call myself a political atheist as well. These gods are not serving us well. They're false gods. We need to stop idolizing them and putting our faith in them. It's not working out, is it? This has nothing to do with deifying markets. It has nothing to do with that. It's something way more important. And I mentioned on the title, if you're watching this online, that I talk about seed oils. So I want to talk about seed oils again. It's my favorite thing. And I love hearing all the people who keep contacting me. And you can do so at hello@aneighborschoice.com. You can drop a comment on our YouTube stream, as we've just read some from that. You can engage us on aneighborschoice.com in the comment section of our articles that pertain to your interest. But I love hearing so many people coming to me and saying they didn't know about the seed oil issue, because a lot of people know about carbs and sugar stuff because keto and everything has popularized that, and that's a good thing and that's important. But the seed oil thing is a huge, huge elephant in the room that I'm just now learning about myself just recently, getting more attuned to the specifics of why that's such a big, huge, detrimental, essential problem for all these chronic illnesses that people are facing in the West. But I have, I'm going to release soon an interview with Tucker Goodrich, who is a data analyst and someone who's had a lot of success understanding numbers and statistics and data and reading and understanding the science. And his blog, we'll have the interview up on our website at neighborschoice.com as part of our podcast. But fascinating discussion, 2-hour discussion, everything you want to know about seed oils and how they interact with your body. Someone said, does seed oil include peanut butter? Yes. They use at least most of the peanut butters that you get in the store. And the problem is we've had decades of seed oil consumption, overconsumption in our Western diets, that it's probably a good thing to lay off the natural peanut butter as well, just to kind of give your linoleic acid levels a break a little bit. But I want to read this conclusion because I talk about seed oils a lot, but I want to show you what others are saying who've been diving into the data really good in the science. This is from Tucker Goodrich's blog, yelling-stop.blogspot.com. He says, The largest single change in the diet and composition of the human body since 1900 is in the percentage of the omega-6 fat linoleic acid. This change has been accompanied by epidemics of obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, indicating a fundamental change has occurred in the functioning of the human body. The direct negative effect of N6 supplementation in humans and mice on ARDS prognosis alone suggests N6 restrictions should be considered as a longer-term prophylactic measure against severe coronavirus infections as well as for other causes of ARDS, as does the effect of N6 consumption on PL fat composition and oxidation and the negative effect of that on ARDS. The clear, direct effect of N6-derived leukotoxin on ARDS should warrant significant efforts at determining if the levels of N6 fats, which have no precedent in our evolutionary history, have altered fundamental immunological pathways in a deleterious fashion. No dietary change can convey perfect immunity, but as manipulation of dietary factors such as hyperglycemia are an established part of treatment of pulmonary infection, and as consumption of N6-rich seed oils has a clear effect on pathology of ARDS, it seems that a critical look at this issue is necessary. For individuals, this should be a further incentive to fix their diet to one more in line with our evolution. ARDS is the situation that most people will have when they have a lethal experience or a severe problem with this new virus. So it's time to make a big choice to educate ourselves about what we can do to help it. And it has potential effect, again, in removing these things for our mental health as well, which is a big issue, especially with all the stress and chaos and negativity out there, that getting rid of these seed oils, you find them in everywhere. Watch out for ingredients when you look at spices and ingredients that you pour, cooking with. Sometimes it can be in a spice that you mix in with. You'll see canola oil or any of these seed oils. And these things have a hidden effect. They accumulate. The way Tucker Goodrich says, it's like cigarettes. They build up over time, and it creates a problem that is correlated with all these different problems we have in Western countries. And it's also correlated with an increased appetite and always wanting to consume carbs and sugar all the time, which is kind of interesting. Why a lot of people fail on the keto lifestyle is that if they're not removing the seed oils, as soon as they take a break, it's like they get a ravenous appetite for carbs and sugar because the seed oils keep making you want to overconsume them. So that's interesting how these things all tie together. And this data is backed up by scientific literature. It's right there in the literature. And you just got to have people who can connect the dots and see the data and make a case for why you have to get these things out of your life. And that also includes, by the way, chicken and pork and things that are fed these seed oils. Monogastric animals, they have one chamber in their stomach, like chicken and pork. They're fed seed oils and they store that fat as toxic seed oil type stuff in their body fat and skin. So when you eat that, you can accumulate a lot of that as well. So it's a kind of a downer for folks who like chicken and pork and stuff like that, that you got to move away from that or get it where it's not, where you can be assured that there's not those types of feeds to the cows and to the pigs and chicken, which is hard to find that. It's a tough thing, but we'll have to keep working on it together. We'll be back for hour 2. I'm David Granosky. Godspeed.
Your home for news, talk, and Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
From ABC News, I'm Michelle Franzen. As coronavirus cases go down, vaccines are ramping up. The Biden administration now says the country is on track to get shots in the arms of millions of Americans by the end of summer.
Biden's COVID response coordinator, Jeff Zients, says the administration continues to up weekly allocations to both states and pharmacies.
With 14.5 million doses allocated to states, tribes, and territories, and 2.1 million through the federal retail pharmacy program, we've nearly doubled weekly supply of doses. in just 5 weeks.
Zion says if Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine is authorized by the FDA this week, there could be 3 to 4 million more doses added to the mix next week. Mark Remillard, ABC News.
This past hour, President Biden signing an executive order to help address supply chain issues, from making enough protective equipment and semiconductor computer chips that have affected car manufacturing, he says, to creating jobs. He commented on an earlier meeting with a bipartisan group of lawmakers on the supply chain issues and called it productive.
The resilience and reliability of our critical supply chains. This is a critical area where Republicans and Democrats agreed. It was one of the best meetings. It's the best meeting I think we've had so far, although we've only been here about 5 weeks. It was like the old days. People actually are on the same page.
In California, Tiger Woods remains in the hospital recovering from leg surgery after his SUV crash.
Investigators have not yet pulled data from the so-called black box or event data recorder that Genesis confirms was in the SUV. Most newer cars have them, recording data from the vehicle. LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva says right now there is no indication that Woods was distracted and looking at a phone.
We do not have any information on that whatsoever. I mean, we'll find out on that.
The sheriff saying that stretch of roadway from January of last year until this week had 13 accidents, 4 of them with injuries.
ABC's Alex Stone, you're listening to ABC News.
Would you get on an airplane if you knew it had a 50% chance of crashing? You may be riding that plane right now. If you have your money in a 401k or IRA and you plan to take out the recommended percentage each year when you retire, your chance of running out of money is 50%. 50%. But there's a better and safer way to secure your income in retirement. Discover how in a free book called Rescue Your Retirement. This wealth building strategy has never had a losing year in more than a century. In fact, even the man who invented the 401k now prefers this method instead. Get Rescue Your Retirement free for just a small shipping charge and enjoy a safe landing and a comfortable retirement. Get this free book and make sure you don't run out of money. Hurry, this offer is extremely limited. To get your free copy, just go to growwealthsafely.com. That's growwealthsafely.com to discover how to rescue your retirement. growwealthsafely.com.
Ghana received its first doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. It is the first country to receive vaccines through the United Nations-backed COVAX initiative. ABC's Maggie Ruley has more.
She spoke with Brandon Locke. He's the policy advisor at One Campaign. And, he said the fact that we're even talking about this right now, just barely a year into a pandemic, we already have vaccines in lower income countries. That is a huge deal.
It's easy to forget just how impressive the COVAX facility is in terms of what we managed to accomplish in such a short period of time.
Brandon says that wealthier nations could vaccinate every single member of their population, and there would still be more than 1.2 billion doses left over.
Ghana is one of 92 countries getting the vaccine through COVAX. GameStop is looking for a new CFO. Jim Bell's departure comes after the wild Reddit-fueled swings in the stock price of the company. Bell will step down as executive vice president and CFO on March 26th. Officials with the Minnesota Transportation Department asked for the public's help to come up with names for 8 new snowplows. They ran a contest and got about 24,000 suggestions. There are now 50 finalists, which include Raspberry, Brut, Road Crew, and Mary Tyler Moore Snow. The contest ends Friday. This is ABC News.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but thought it would be too difficult? Then try Babbel. Babbel starts by teaching you words and phrases that gradually get more complex. Soon, you're practicing short conversations. So in 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking a new language in a few weeks. Babbel is built around real life. It teaches you practical conversations that you will actually use. Babbel, language for life. Celebrating 10 million subscriptions sold. Now try Babbel for free. Just text TRY to 64,000 to start learning a new language today. That's TRY to 64,000.
Michelle Franz in ABC News.
Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com.
Your home for news, talk, and information. 1040 WHBO Pinellas Park. Tampa Bay's all new News Talk 1040.
It's the only way I get news.
From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media. A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. So glad to be with you again. So glad to have this time to learn and grow together with a positive perspective on the news, a positive, forward-looking approach. Not reacting, but going forward, being proactive, learning and thinking together in a variety of subjects. Most of the time we do politics and culture, economics and art. And today we do science. Science and You. That's our segment today. And to do so, we have our chief science advisor and physicist, Dr. Yu. How you doing?
Thank you, David, for having me on. I'm doing great.
Well, so glad to have you on again. Now, we've talked a lot about the stars, but today I think we can take a look a little more closer to home, a little bit more inside of us. What are we made of, right? I thought we'd go into that today and what's going on in consciousness. My goodness. So first, I want to start with this story that is in a lot of different publications. One version of it is in singularityhub.com. It says scientists communicated with people while they were lucid dreaming. And this is by Shelley Fan. In a mind-bending paper published last week in Current Biology, teams of scientists from 4 countries found that it's possible to communicate with people who are actively dreaming. It's not simple information either. The volunteers, roughly 24 spread across 4 labs, were able to listen to math problems and answer them using facial twitches and eye movements. One group of sleepers could even decipher Morse code and reply to the outside world in real time. Our experimental goal is akin to finding a way to talk with an astronaut who is on another world, but in this case, the world is entirely fabricated on the basis of memories stored in the brain, the researcher said. This is crazy. Research into dreams has long relied on the recall of people after waking up, which I'm sure you agree is riddled with errors, confusion, and missed details. The new study means that we now have a way to directly engage with people while they're deep asleep, probe the contents of their dreams, and potentially alter them. It's exciting to try something that is seemingly impossible. We can now actually investigate the dreaming state directly and interactively, said study author Dr. Christopher Apple at Osnabrück University. It opens the door to studies such as learning during sleep and then still remember it after waking up. We're using dreams as a new sort of psychotherapy, assisting people with nightmares in real time, or for creative projects like writing or art by tapping into a brain state that's less bound by reality, or even for entertainment, a la Total Recall or Inception, where a dream can be talked into a fantasy, where a dreamer can be talked into a fantasy scenario of their choice. There's just one catch. Not all dream types straddle and bridge the inner mind and outside world. For it to work, you need to be able to lucid dream. So you have to be able to do lucid dream. The article says, as we sleep, our brain activity goes through cycles of activity. Dreams often occur during REM sleep, named after its defining characteristics. Our eyes rapidly dart all over the place. REM sleep has been tied to the brain rewinding its experiences from the previous day and replaying them in fast-forward motion so that critical memories stick around, something dubbed memory consolidation. Another school of thought thinks that dreams are our brain's way of simulating future possibilities, silently sculpting our brain's neural network so that if a prediction does happen, we're able to learn faster and more efficiently. But the truth is, we really don't know why we dream, the neuroscience behind dreams, or how the contents of a dream relates to experience or memory. What if we could just ask the sleeping person as they're dreaming? Lucid dreaming is where it happens. So what do you think of that, Dr. Yu? I'll just stop there for now.
I think it's a very important topic, and I believe everybody, all the listeners, should be seems not strange, not foreign at all. If you think about your personal experience, I have the experience. If I left my computer video, left it on while I fall asleep, you know what happens? I find out quite often. For a while, and I will become the radio still, the video still playing, and my mind in my sleep seems like it become part of the story. When the radio talking, seems like in my dream I'm communicate with the real world, the conscious world, the so-called dreaming. Dreaming is a subconscious motion of brain activities, subconscious. It is actually, it can become a part of a conscious, can communicate with the consciousness, the real world communication at a certain level. So that's why they talk about the lucid state, right? So that's called a rapid eye motion state. So I'm not surprised that you can communicate with somebody while they are in the state of sleeping. And I believe lots of people have that one. But the significant is, it mentioned about it. So if you can communicate, study this one, and you can utilize this technique to do what? And I benefited the most is called the sleep learning. How sleep learning? I often put the most challenging world mysteries in physics problem. Right before I fall asleep, I said, I wanted to solve this problem. Right before I sleep, I just quickly read the statement. So what's the problem is? And then I forgot it and fall asleep. You know what happens? Often I wake up in the early morning, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I found that the problem solved because during the sleep, my brain is processing. So the subconscious motion of brain activities, it is just like a real consciousness motion, but it is at a more calm state and more efficient state, and very easy to solving logical problems and put all the puzzles together subconsciously, and I find it so efficient. And so I use that to solve several challenging problems, and I found that there's no way I can do this one in consciousness state.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. So there is a subconscious, perhaps, right?
That's correct. The so-called, so now you mentioned about the consciousness. So what is consciousness? Consciousness is basically a brain motion. What is the motion? Is the atoms, molecules. These are magnetic objects. When they in motion, they generate electromagnetic waves in your brain, and that electromagnetic waves can go through your brain, which is just like a magnetic tape, go through the tape. So that's why you still think, you still see the image, because those brain cells store the pictures in magnetic capacity, just like a magnetic tape, the same thing. So when you have a subconscious motion, brain in motion, it still goes through the brain path, the path in your brains, and still see pictures, see something, and so of course, and your subconsciousness can still sensing real world, activities, in some. So you can communicate and can think logically in that state. And I found that that's the relaxed state is the most efficient state to solving difficult problems.
Yeah, and I wonder how the subconscious relates to the right hemisphere of the brain because, you've seen me interview Ian McGilchrist, the neuroscientist, who talks about how so much of our minds are dominated by the left hemisphere approach to, sorting and categorizing and organizing and separating and classifying. But the right brain seems to see more intuitive, holistic picture. And that's also how the subconscious is described by people sometimes, that it's absorbing data that we're missing in our conscious mind. I wonder how that interacts with the hemispheres. That's just my thought, out loud.
Yes, I think you make point to something I just realized. Maybe the main, the conscious world solving analytical problems, logical problems. However, subconscious brain. So now you're talking about subconscious brain. Is that a right brain? I think a right brain control the left hand, right? So left hander is more pictorial. So that's holistic, a system thinking.
Right.
Yes. So I believe that could be in order to collect information, remember information, and through consciousness brain. During the day, we sit in the class and we learn to memorize to do the things. However, subconsciously, during the subconscious state, your right brain integrated all the information together, have a holistic view. So that's why I find the sleep learning help me understanding better than remember things.
Right.
Makes sense.
Right. And it's so interesting too, because you have, when you have dreams, you have symbols and you have these recurring archetypes that people report in the story. And that's kind of what a right brain thinkers are kind of known for being, more, story driven and symbol driven and integrating a lot of information with pictures. The article says, even more fascinating, once awoken, the participants reported that the questions had incorporated into their dreams. For example, one person said that he was at a party with friends when the scientist's voice came from the outside, like the narrator of a movie. Another mentioned that he perceived finger tapping while he was fighting against goblins in the dream and being surprised that he could do math in battle. A few people remembered their answers even after awakening. That's just interesting, isn't it?
Yes, that's exactly matching what I dreamed. Once I left like a movie or some reading materials on. Yes, gradually I become part of the story, number one, and then interact with the voice from outside the picture. Yes, I do hear that.
And it's interesting too, when you have fevers, at least for me, whenever I've had a bad fever, sometimes you have these strange dreams where you're trying to quantify everything and mathematical type like puzzles that never end. I have those when I've had fevers in the past. I wonder how that relates to these hemispheres and their relationship to the subconscious. It's just really fascinating stuff to think about,
Yes, fever, you are talking about that when you're in the illness state.
Yeah.
In that state, actually, you can release. It might be make other places more relaxed. Somehow, when you in natural state, I believe in natural state, the thinking and the integrate things is more logical. Some kind of is more efficient and more logical, more peaceful. Somehow put things together. So that's why lots of people they said that you don't want to be angry. To make a decision before sleep.
Right.
You want to sleep overnight, and then you make a decision. So what the difference in make a sleep overnight? In the subconscious state, they can put all the things in your entire experience and together. So now you see a broader picture. That matches the right brain, do system thinking integration, and the left brain, and do logical and the word, performance that announces, something, tasks.
Well, let's take a quick break. You're listening to Science and You on A Neighbor's Choice. You can email us hello@aneighborschoice.com if you have a science question. We'll return in just a moment. Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer
of White Oak Pasture, a 6th-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't realize they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa. Not attorney spokeswoman.
You can't have a fresh outlook on the new year if you're staring through a chipped or cracked windshield. Autoglass America will fix it and give you up to $150 cash back to help pay holiday bills. With qualifying insurance, we'll come to you with mobile service and install a premium quality replacement with a lifetime warranty at no cost to you. Get a great outlook on the new year with a new windshield and New Year's cash from Autoglass America. 813-96-GLASS. 813-96-GLASS.
Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Granosky, your host. We're doing our Science and You segment here with our physicist friend, Dr. Yu. So, Dr. Yu, I want to turn to this story real quick here in the New York Post. Here's this story here. It says, 5% have had a near-death experience, and they say it made life worth living, by Reed Tucker. And it's about this new book coming out by Dr. Bruce Greyson, who is a psychiatrist and someone who has been scientifically studying near-death experiences and trying to classify and order and find out what's going on here. And of course, we're not going to do justice to it all in just this moment, but one quote I wanted to pull from the article for you is, it said, in 2004, Roisin Fitzpatrick suffered a brain hemorrhage at 35 and landed in intensive care. She had a near-death experience in which she, quote, became pure energy, unquote, and realized that, quote, there is no beginning or end, no life or death. It made absolutely no difference if I was in my body. It was not even relevant because I had become at one with this incredibly potent, highly charged field of energy, she told Greyson. And that reminded me of what you talk about with magnetism and consciousness.
Yes, yes, we're talking about, when you think about the brain thinking, functioning, you do not feel like you're thinking within the brain, and you find out that you're thinking and the image or somehow is go beyond the skull. of your head, right? The brain. You feel like you are somehow integrated with the universe. I want to say what really happening when people thinking. The thinking itself, first, because you have a hard motion and your body motion, right? You're alive, your body your brain have activities, right? Create a moving magnetic field. That's the thinking process. You have a moving magnetic field interactions. Interaction with what? With the universe is filled with a magnetic field, magnetic fluids or magnetic field. So your brain actually thinking is a vibration of magnetic charge particles, right? The charge particle were excited the universal, the magnetic field into with the field in the field with the universe. So that's where you interact with. That interaction, and during that interaction, you create all the dreams, you call it all ideas and consciousness, and you can feel things from distance. You can see lights. Light is interaction, is your eye interaction with the electromagnetic wave. And because your eye made by magnetic particles, right? So if electromagnetic wave from environment interact, so when they vibration, your eyes also vibrate with them, create signals. So that's why it's all the interaction with the electromagnetic waves. So now they think about the consciousness. When you brain thinking, your interaction go beyond the brain itself, because the brain is charged particle, is magnetic brain. And when they in motion, they interact with external electromagnetic field environment. So it is really out of body. You can feel like you're thinking is out of body experience, not within your body. Actually, it's beyond your brain. So that's why they find out that during sleep, your physical body is constrained. However, your consciousness body, the brain, actually you can see, reflect, see yourself, and can traveling a lot of places. Just like electromagnetic signals, the signals transmitted through the medium. You can be anywhere. You can receive from the distant place.
Right. So when you look at this story, and it's talking about people see people who recently passed that nobody knew had passed. When they have a near-death experience, they encounter people who other people say, oh yeah, they had just died and nobody knew about it, and they visited them, you know what I mean? Or they see loved ones that had passed before them. Other people report.
That could be true.
Other people report seeing events happening in other rooms that their body was not in when they were in their dead-like state. You see what I mean? So there's some strange stuff going on there.
Yes, because your vibration pattern, the information is stored in the vibration magnetic field. The information did not disappear after you died. The information could be still there. So that's why you can interact with it.
And that information can see things?
Oh, you can feel things. Maybe appeared as a see, but you can feel, you see in your brain.
Interesting. So people are saying they're seeing stuff happen in other rooms where their body is not in the lab table. It's just interesting to think how you could see that. You're saying the brain is interpreting that as a sight?
Yes, because the information is stored in that place. That's through the electromagnetic vibration. Yeah, that's through the memory, magnetic memory imprinted in that area.
Huh. There's a lot to unpack there. We're going to have to leave it there for now, Dr. Yu. It's always great having you on the program.
Thank you.
And that's it for Science and You. Remember, you can go to our website, aneighborschoice.com, click on the menu, you'll see Science and You, where you can watch all of these episodes and learn about physics, science, and even consciousness too. We'll return in just a moment with Jeff Deist of the Mises Institute to look at the news from an economic perspective. Back in a moment.
There is all kinds of lunacy going on.
Yes.
The madness of 2020.
Weekdays 11 to 2.
I'm just so fed up with these Democrats. It's unbelievable.
Get it straight from Chris Plant.
They're so hypocritical. It makes me sick.
It's the Chris Plant Show.
This has just got me going on.
And the left is waging war against the police in the United States.
Telling it like it is.
You should be thanked profusely for getting to the point. You're a voice of reason in the sea of idiots.
The Chris Plant Show. Weekdays 11 to 2. News Talk 1040 WHBO.
The Los Angeles County Supervisor directing a safety review of the road where Tiger Woods crashed his SUV, the stretch with a history of accidents. LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva said drugs or alcohol are not being considered as factors.
The deputy on scene assessed the condition of Tiger Woods, and there was no evidence of any impairment whatsoever. He was lucid, no odor of alcohol, no evidence of any medication, narcotics, or anything like that.
President Joe Biden today officially extending the national emergency declared over the COVID-19 pandemic beyond March 1st, a year after it was declared by former President Trump. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy in the hot seat on Capitol Hill testifying before the House Oversight and Reform Committee. DeJoy apologized for postal delays during the holidays, but told lawmakers calling for his resignation to, quote, get used to him. The one-dose Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine could be approved by the FDA for emergency use authorization as soon as Friday. Dave Packer, ABC News.
You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski, here live on radio, podcast, and video stream. And we have our guest with us, the president of the Mises Institute, Jeff Deist. How's it going, Jeff?
David, it is going great. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Hey, I wanted to get your take. You know, the story of Tiger Woods is a pretty intense story to see that, you know, so a figure of you know, my childhood. It's a nostalgic thing to think about Tiger Woods, such a big icon of my childhood and I guess other people's younger years. But when you see stories like that, what does it make you think about, you know, when you have this kind of thing?
Yeah, he's just had so much trouble, you know, this terrible accident now. God knows what it's done to his legs. And it's interesting because it immediately brought up feelings not only of his past troubles, where he had that, you know, that big incident with his ex-wife. I guess that's 12 years ago or something like that now. But also it brought up the death of Kobe Bryant just a year or so ago when he had the helicopter accident. So look, the last 12 months, we don't need these kinds of stories. I mean, it just feels like so many things are shifting under our feet. So it sounds like he's going to be okay. So, but it also shows you the power of celebrity and in figures in our life. And that's why there's almost, you know, when someone like a Kobe Bryant dies, we feel it so deeply. And of course, in a sense, David, that's absurd. You and I don't know Kobe Bryant. I don't know about you. I'm not even a particular NBA fan nor a Lakers fan. So why would that sort of affect me viscerally? Why would I care about that? Well, because we live in a celebrity culture, a media culture, and there's lessons, I think, to be taken from this. That's why Trump was effective. That's why AOC is effective, because these people get a hold of us on some emotional or visceral level. And, you know, watching a superstar athlete like Tiger, especially when he's had this sort of tabloid life, there's something very human about all this. And as much as you know, we like to think that rationality and reason and the best ideas win the day, I don't think that's always the case.
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. And there's something about, to me, there's something nostalgic about figures that kind of harken back to a time when things weren't so political all the time, you know? And I mean, you know, everything wasn't so political and partisan and tribalistic. I mean, you know, Tiger Woods represented a hope in that time, you know, of of being someone who could break racial barriers and unite people across all different backgrounds. And it seems so far away from where we currently are, where it's all about trying to stoke up tribalism, about external identity and so forth. You know, it's just kind of a strange thing when you think about it. It's almost a relic from another time, you know. I mean, he's not a relic, but I mean what he represents, you know.
And I think that is true. When he won the Masters in 1997, that was his first major. It was also the first time that a black person had won not only the Masters, but a major championship in golf. You know, a lot of people said, hey, this is great. The game is growing. There's this new figure. He happens to be, I guess, at least black on his father's side. There were, in fact, of course, country clubs in this country that didn't allow black members, didn't allow Jewish members. That was a legitimate grievance. And so I think there was basically a happiness when Tiger won that championship and started to become such a dominant golfer in the late 90s, early 2000s. And people thought that this was a good thing. And then Tiger himself was very modest and not political. He would go visit whichever president. You know, he was friendly with W. He was friendly with Obama. He played golf with Trump. He was kind of like a Michael Jordan figure in the sense that he didn't take an overt political stance on everything and understood that a lot of the people who were buying his Nike gear might be white Republican old dudes. So, you know, so just in the time of Tiger's career, think how grossly that has changed. And today, of course, black-white relations are far worse, I would say, than they were in 97.
Yeah, it's just an example of how when we introduce politics and government, it introduces coercion, which creates a lot of division, because preemptive coercion, which is the heart and soul of state intervention, it just always seems to ruin peace and harmony and reconciliation rather than, you know, heal it, you know?
Well, and it's designed to benefit the political class, not to benefit us.
Right.
Doesn't do us any good to be at each other's throats. And of course, in real America, all kinds of Americans get along just fine. It's just in the political arena where the political class wants to say that there's all these terrible problems in the country, and we need them to solve them or to protect us from the bad guys or whatever it might be. It's an old story, and we keep falling for it.
Wow. Yeah, I want to turn now to something that is, of course, closer to our current hellscape time of what we're seeing politics do to us. And it's this thing on Twitter that Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, tweeted out a couple of days ago, and I saw that you retweeted it too. So, you know, he says, update, if you're flying back into Canada, you'll need to show a negative PCR test result before you board the plane. And as of today, you'll need to take another PCR test when you land. You'll then have to wait at an approved hotel at your own expense for your test results. If your results come back negative, you'll be able to quarantine at home. This quarantine is mandatory and will be enforced. If your test results come back positive for it, you'll be required to immediately quarantine in designated government facilities.
Well, I guess internment camps are just fine when you're a left progressive. But, you know, look, it's not for me to say what Canada ought to do because they don't have our Constitution. They don't have our First Amendment with its right of assembly. They don't have our Fourth Amendment, which I would argue bans any kind of testing of a human's bloodstream or, nasal cavity or whatever it might be in terms of that to me is a seizure under the Fourth Amendment. So they don't have the same laws as us, and that's fine. I would argue that it is a blatant violation, though, of international law when you can't enter your own country with your own passport. It's one thing to go to another country. If you or I, as American citizens with American passports, want to go to Costa Rica next month, let's say, and Costa Rica says, well, David, I want you to have a COVID test and some proof before you arrive, because what we don't want is for you to end up sick and in our hospital here in Costa Rica indefinitely, maybe even dying. And so it's one thing for our own citizens for us to deal with them, but we're not going to do that for strangers. I think that is, I would probably disagree with that approach, but I would certainly recognize Costa Rica's right to impose that. And I would never say that I have an unfettered right to enter Costa Rica on my own terms without that's they're a sovereign nation.
Right.
But returning to your own country, that's a different story. Right. You don't have any other place to go. In most cases, people just have a single passport. And the country you're coming back from might be, kicking you out. You might be at the end of your visa. So to me, you should always be able to enter your own country. And the fact that you're sick, okay, send them home, send them to the doctor, whatever it might be. And people do that out of their own self-interest. You don't need to enforce that. But the idea that you can deny someone entrance to their own country, where they have citizenship and a passport, based on the supposed contents of their nasal cavity or something, to me, is just an egregious anti-human approach. And I don't know where the hell Trudeau thinks he gets the authority for that. I would ask a Canadian to explain it to me, but it's outrageous. And it would be nice to see that clown treated by the international community as basically the criminal he's become. And instead of feted by everyone like some sort of golden boy, progressive leader.
Yeah. Well, he loves controlling people. He likes to use that word, build back better, build back better. He goes on to say, if you're returning through our land border, you'll also need to take a PCR test when you arrive. This is on top of the negative test result you must show from the 72 hours before your arrival. Toward the end of your 14-day quarantine, you'll be required to take another PCR test. It sounds like a parody. What is this dude doing? Why is this happening?
Yeah, it is a parody. What he's doing is what he can get away with doing. It's just that simple. This is based on his desire, like every politician, to flout and advance his power, and also to keep an eye on his polls and on public sentiment. I think what they often do is they float kind of an outrageous trial balloon of an idea, see how the public reacts, and then you have a pullback from that maybe if you need to. So that's what I think a lot of what's going on in this COVID era is it's trial balloon by governments. They didn't know COVID was coming. It came out of nowhere. It's a crisis. The public clamored for safety and security. They were totally willing to accept masks and stay-at-home orders and separation, social distancing, closure of businesses and restaurants and schools. So once politicians get a whiff of that or a sense that that's okay, they're going to push the envelope. It's just in their nature. And so this kind of thing from Trudeau doesn't surprise me. And it's up to us. I mean, don't assume that we're going to go back to normal. By definition, if you've been doing something for a year or so continuously, it is the new normal. Right. The only way we get back is through us, by pushing. The politicians aren't going to just change their tune on masks or anything else because of the COVID numbers dropping. It's going to require us asserting ourselves.
Right. It doesn't seem like anybody wants to really assert themselves in a rational and confident and, courageous manner. It just seems like it's just children on both sides of the, political aisle, when it comes to it. Nobody wants to talk clearly and boldly and confidently and direct people towards self-empowerment. It's all about two rival nannies fighting over who's going to be the nanny state, queen or king,
Well, that's why they invented Irish democracy. Irish democracy is the term we apply for when people just sort of shrug and ignore the latest law or rule or edict. And that's exactly what America needs right now. It's interesting to me that civil disobedience is only noble for some causes and some people. It's absolutely warranted here. It's absolutely needed here. It's absolutely noble here. So, if everyone in Tampa just gets up tomorrow and says, look, we need to go about our business. Elderly people can stay home and worry about the vaccine, but the rest of us need to basically get back to business as usual. We need things to be open, no masks. And, those of us who are maybe under 60 or so will take our chances with this almost entirely survivable virus.
Right.
And that's just what it needs to be. But we need I think that starts with the individual, and hopefully, you just get some mass, some numbers behind you.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But hey, we're going to keep going and digging in and telling the truth and speaking out. And we're going to take a quick break. And when we return, I want to get into this story that Jeff published just a few hours ago on Mises.org. It's about the political economy of COVID hysteria. That's an interesting topic. So we're going to dive into that when we return with Jeff Deist from Mises.org. Back in a moment.
Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality, grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It's a stressful process. There are attorneys in Tampa Bay that keep clients well informed, creating less stress. That law firm is Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't they have a claim for the loss until they talk to Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to Catania.com. Over 28 years in practice. Catania, personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys. Catania, putting families first.
Office Tampa.
Not attorney spokeswoman. Hi, this is Gary from Good Faith Homebuyers, and I buy houses cash. If you own your house and want to sell it fast, call me at 727-330-6224. That's 727-330-6224. I can pay cash and close fast. I buy houses in any condition, any price range, and any location. I'm not a realtor or associated with any realty company. I'm a private real estate investor who buys several houses a month and wants to buy more. I'll buy inherited houses, divorce houses, behind in payment houses. I'll even buy my tenant won't pay me the rent houses. Do you own a house that is trashed and needs thousands of dollars in repairs? Great, because I love buying junky houses. I buy vacant houses, abandoned houses, condemned houses, and foreclosure houses. If you own a house and want to sell it fast, call me at 727-330-6224. That's 727-330-6224.
Feeling lonely? You don't need to. There are friends in your community looking to be part of your life. Where are they? At your local church, of course. It's time to start getting back together for support, love, and friendship. There's no better place to do that than at your church. Make a plan this Sunday to be at one of the area's welcoming churches. You'll not regret it. The welcoming committee is there every Sunday. See you soon.
A Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm here with Jeff Deist and of the Mises Institute. And I want to get into this story here, Jeff, that you published on Mises.org called Professor Philip Bagas on the Political Economy of COVID Hysteria. And you say that he published a remarkable article making the case for developing a political economy to help us understand the 2020 coronavirus and similar events prone to mass hysteria. Now, this is interesting to me because, you know, I like looking at the hysteria of crowds with mimetic theory and Rene Girard. So, first of all, what is a political economy? What's that?
Well, it's an interesting concept. It's been around forever. It's about understanding how politics and governance affects the economy and vice versa. So it's a social science. Political economy is a social science, and it blends sort of the political realities with the economic policies of the real world, and it attempts to understand what politicians do through a bit of an economic lens, and to understand economics through a bit of a political lens. So, we've all felt this frustration. Why doesn't Congress just do X? Some preferred policy that you or I might favor. Well, the answer is usually politics, right? If we say, why don't they just get rid of this stupid tax or something like that? Well, there's some reasons and some interests and some underlying realities, and maybe even things we don't know about, special interest favoritism at work. So political economy is sort of the real politic of economics. And so normally I'm not one to recommend academic articles, but this new article that Professor Bogus wrote for an academic journal is really, really, I think, fascinating. So I tried to summarize it in a blog post for people just to give them a taste for it. And as you said, you like to study the concept of hysteria from Rene Girard's mimetic theory. So this is coming at it more from an economist's approach, which I think is interesting. And so he goes back through some of the literature, and there's a lot of medical literature and psychology literature that explains what happens with like the placebo effect. I'm sure your listeners have heard of that, where you can sort of suggest to someone that they're getting a cure, and then they'll actually get better taking a pill that maybe has no active ingredients in it, simply because of the passage of time, or because their mind is so powerful that they believe they're taking a real drug. So this kind of thing is understood and talked about in psychological circles and in medical circles, but it's not so much talked about among economists. And so you come along and you have a COVID crisis, so-called, and you end up enacting a bunch of policies, maybe not at the legislative level, but at the sort of dictatorial level of a Trudeau or a Trump or now a Biden, and you start to try to understand what these policies really mean. And if you look at them from the perspective or lens of economics, it's really interesting to say, wow, it's amazing how government expands its power and uses media to do so, and sort of brushes these trade-offs under the rug, that we're just going to print some money, or we're going to create some monetary or fiscal stimulus to keep everybody going while they're at home and nobody's working, and travel shut down and restaurants are shut down and all that. Really a fascinating article, and I think we need to think about these things because what a good economist or social scientist like Philip Bogus can do to help people like us. Because, David, we forget sometimes, what's the point of economics? It's supposed to help us. It's supposed to make a better world, make us richer, make us understand more, make us healthier, happier, all these things. So I love it when a real brainy economist comes along and writes something that has, to me, a lot of practical value, in the sense that we can learn from him to understand how big government makes all this hysteria worse, and how it really makes the COVID crisis worse.
Do you think understanding the madness of crowds and how it plays a role in the economy and markets, does that challenge some of the foundations of Austrian economics, or the idea that markets act in rational ways? I mean, I know that's a kind of a quick summary of something that's more complex than that of the Austrian school, but there's a lot of ideas in the free market world about, the rational actors, the rational choices. So, if you do this, it's going to create this kind of rational reaction because of supply and demand and all these different things. But does the madness of crowds, if it's more fully understood, does it present a potential challenge to some of the foundations of these ideas?
Well, I hope so, because I think we should always be challenging our own ideas. And there is a perception that economists, particularly of the free market kind, tend to have this view of a hyper-rational homo economicus individual, as opposed to viewing society or the economy more holistically. And with crowds, we have hysteria. Those two things go hand in hand. But I think a lot of this, David, is semantics. I mean, there's nothing in economics that says everyone is rational or smart or does the kind of things we would want them to do. When we say an actor is rational, we're talking about means and ends. So I might think it's totally irrational for someone to become a habitual heroin addict, to wake up every morning on their couch in some filthy apartment and just go out and worry about scoring heroin, coming back to that apartment and using it and wasting another day of their life. I might say, oh my gosh, that's deeply irrational. But they're a rational actor in the sense that they have means and ends. They have, $20 in their pocket and they call a friend to get a ride, and that friend takes them to score their heroin. They're still acting as a rational actor in a sense, because there's a means and an ends. We just disagree with the end. So I think it's important before we are too dismissive. You got to study economics a little bit to think about some of these things. But yes, I mean, it's a challenge. We have all these economic theories, and then something like COVID comes along, and 90% of the world wants to just sweep economics under the rug and say, well, forget about that. Right now, all we got to do is save lives, as though there's no economic aspect to saving lives, should the trade-offs involved, should the shutdowns. That this is just about human concerns. Let's not listen to economists for a while. Let's just listen to the doctors. Well, that's absurd. Doctors aren't omnipotent, and doctors can't make all the trade-offs and the ethical decisions for us and the moral decisions for us about how we're going to live our lives, and they certainly can't make up for all the material loss, not just the loss of life, but all the material loss. So it's something that we have to grapple with and understand. But I think most of your listeners would probably agree that hysteria is not helpful, and that we ought to be looking at things not through some sort of alarmist lens. And Dr. Boggs' paper points out why it's in the interest of politicians to always overhype the dangers of these types of things, because that expands their power. And then if the danger is less, they seem like they've had a role in that. So we have to think about these things, and I think we have to become more resistant, more hardened, a little more rigorous in our thinking, so that politicians can't pull this stuff over on us.
Yeah, it's certainly food for thought in this time of mass hysteria and mass fear. We're almost out of time, but I do want to get your quick thoughts on what do you think's going to come out of this CPAC event. It's going to be just down the road from where we are here in Florida, but any thoughts to, Rush Limbaugh passed last week, which feels like the end of an era, and his impact was a huge era of the conservative movement. Donald Trump's going to make his return into the public square in a speech on Sunday at CPAC. What do you think's your overall thing you're expecting or looking for, things to look for?
Well, it's going to be very, very interesting. I just heard, as you said, that Trump is going to be there, and we're going to find out if it's still Trump's party or not, or if it's the party of the Liz Cheneys of the world. I think conservatism's in a bad spot. I think it's pretty intellectually incoherent. I think being against the progressives isn't enough. It's not the same as being for something. And I think Donald Trump's going to be too old in 4 years. I don't think that's a viable thing. I'm not sure anyone is telling Trump that, but I wish someone would tell him that. And so, if conservatives want to become a permanent minority party in this country, they're doing the right thing at the moment.
Yeah. Well, it's always great hearing from you. And I think that we're going to continue to see a soul-searching moment for those who don't consider themselves on the left-wing agenda, that are saying, well, who are we and what are we all about? And it's great to have these open discussions, Jeff, about what it means to have liberty. What does it mean to understand how mass hysteria works in our economy, and just kind of have an open conversation instead of just doubling down on everything we've already believed and entrenching ourselves into tribalism,
Absolutely.
Well, very good. Again, thanks for joining us. And folks, you can always follow Jeff at Jeff Deist on Twitter, or you can go to their website, Mises.org, MISES.org, where you can find articles like Jeff's from today. So that's it for A Neighbor's Choice. And remember, you can follow A Neighbor's Choice content, including this episode that you've listened to today, by going to aneighborschoice.com. I'm David Gronowski. Godspeed.